welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show. It's around 9:10 usually. This week I thought we could change from the automatically kind of scheduled Kasparov games because there's a very fun tournament going on, which in past years I've covered a little bit actually with this show. Now on my YouTube channel, Kingscrusher YouTube channel, I covered Korobov, who was an early day one leader with 5 out of 5 for the FIDE World Rapid Championship, which is a very, very exciting event, and it's followed actually by the World Blitz event after. But actually after day 2, the leadership changed hands to Vassily Ivanchuk, who's on 8 out of 10, ahead of even Magnus Carlsen. Magnus isn't doing too badly, 7 out of 10, but Vassily Ivanchuk is the day 2 leader. It's a 3-day event, and I thought it might be of interest to go over this rather than Kasparov games, which if there wasn't anything on, sure, that'd be great as a kind of default. But okay, the World Rapid Championship, I think it's with increment. I'm not entirely sure the time control actually. Maybe one of you can tell me the exact time control. I'm sure it's probably something like 25 minutes and 10-second increment usually. Okay, so one of the first games I'd like to show you is Vassily Ivanchuk's round 7 game, where he clashed against Magnus Carlsen. And if you remember, he actually in previous year beat Magnus Carlsen. There's a video clip of him being very happy at the end, jumping up for joy. So let's have a look at this year's game in round 7. So D4 from Vassily Ivanchuk. Let's actually connect to Livebook and add a bit, so just in case as well. Now, very interesting actually, I think, is a lot of players will play the Slav defense. So what is Ivanchuk's system? And he plays knight f3, and not just this game but in other games he starts with knight f3, and after knight f6 he's played this in other games as well. In this tournament it's the 3rd most popular move. It's actually queen c2. Usually knight c3 is the most popular, e3, but he plays queen c2. That's quite interesting. I thought it holds on to the pawn. There's not some sort of weird gambit. So sometimes I personally in my blitz I would like gambit, and sometimes it's very unpleasant actually when black takes and clings on. But this is less controversial in many respects, just ready to recapture this pawn immediately. And also the queen is actually usefully sitting on the sensitive diagonal, and it cuts out bishop f5, of course. And in fact, you know, usually players don't bring out their bishop. E6 was played by Magnus, so sometimes it's called the triangle system as well. Knight bd2, d takes, knight takes c4. And already, yeah, it looks like a nice position for white. Actually, c5. Now, to avoid any issue with an isolated queen's pawn, white actually played d takes. So it's a symmetrical pawn structure, with white having a small edge at the moment. a3, preparing to gain a tempo on this bishop and fianchetto the bishop across that diagonal. Now, actually, this plan isn't stopped. Of b4. In fact, it's, if let's say black tried a5, is there a problem? It's probably uncomfortable. White's already got a big lead in development. Bishop f4 to be followed by rook d1. I'm not sure this is the move that black really wants to play. So we see castling, b4 allowed, bishop b2, and now queen c7 looks like an annoying pin, just in case now of any accidents. The queen is protected as top priority. Knight bd7, e4, and it looks as though already this is looking like a position where it looks more comfortable than probably technically it is. It just looks very comfortable for white, eyeing this e5 square here. And Magnus actually, he lashes out. Perhaps there are more solid moves, but he played actually b5. It's a kind of lashing out because the knight can come to a5. You might think more solid. I think this position has been seen. No, actually, it hasn't been seen that much before. But engine suggestion is actually something like this. This looks radical. This looks radical to do this. But this is the engine position. Just to take here, this position should be about equal apparently. For example, here we have a tactical move like here, or knight d6. And it should be about equal, but we see this lashing out, which does allow knight a5. So queen takes c2, and white does seem technically to be doing nicely here with that b5 target. So it doesn't matter if black takes on e4, we can take on b5 here. And this knight c6 looks dangerous as well. So actually knight takes e4 is played. Bishop takes b5, knight d6, bishop drops in, hitting the rook, white castles, knight b6, rook d1. It just looks as though white has a very pleasant position here, and in fact the bishop looks a little bit awkward at the moment. Maybe it can go to a6 technically. We see rook d8, and this knight comes in, so both knights are actually quite aggressive here from white. If you look at this position, this is actually quite an aggressive position. f6. Now here is a very clever move indeed. Instead of moving the knight back, now if the knight did go routinely back, then actually black might be liking this position after bishop a6. This c4 square, for example, can be got into. It does seem a slight weakness, the c4 square here of white's position, and you can imagine actually this bishop's blunted. So as an example, it looks as though black wouldn't have too many problems, but an alternative move was played in this particular position, which sets black all sorts of problems now with pouncing knights. I don't know if any of you have seen this game so far, white's play, and it's actually in fact the top engine move in this position, and it does actually seem to guarantee white an advantage against Magnus Carlsen. White play, I wonder if any of you can guess it for 200 points. So very interesting position. Does the knight want to go back? Remember, I've already given a slight clue that the c4 square is actually quite robustly controlled by black, and even more so with bishop a6. It didn't deploy to d7, it's ready for bishop a6, which helps coordinate actually 3 minor pieces. But there's a move here for white. Can any of you guess? White playing get an advantage, a clear advantage. Okay, I'm going to show you now. It's actually the bishop dropping back to f3. There's 2 knights ready to pounce. Actually, there's a kind of art to this position that, coming to think about it, looking at it now, it's kind of artistic that both of the knights are very aggressive and black's knight's passive. This bishop retreat gives either an opportunity to pounce into that c6 square and create a kind of fork of 3 pieces, at least 3 pieces. Well, if you include the pawn 4. This is taken. Now, okay, before we go into that, what else could Magnus Carlsen do here? if bishop a6, I think we just go for free into c6, and this is the disaster. You know, like here we can take on b8 or e7, this is, and then d6 drops off. So anyway, f takes is played here. What else? What else? Bishop b7. We can still go in. It's supported by the other knight. The fork is supported. And remember, this is always check here on e7. So even if we take and try and pin, remember it's always check, bang, check. So the bishop f3 is actually the top, in fact, the top engine move. So 200 points if you got that. There's a bit of art at work here, I think, I have to say. So f takes, knight c6. So we're still getting that fork by force. Bishop b7 is played, knight takes e7. Look at black structure, it looks wrecked. In fact here, another interesting move, bishop takes e5 is played. And this is guaranteeing that this is not losing a piece, I believe, whatever happens. If, well, knight bc4 is played. If king takes e7, the check, and then what? Here, we go there, bishop takes d6 check, and if king here, in this position we can just play rook takes d6, and that's better for whites. So actually, difficult position. We see knight bc4. One of the knights is taken off, and the other knight comes to c6, and the remaining knight comes to c6, forking again. That's taken off. So out of the opening, very nice result for Ivanchuk's opening. Pawn up. Black's pawns are fragmented. These pawns look quite solid. 2-to-1 pawn majority here. Isolated pawn here. Bishop against knight. Okay, knight b5. Pair of rooks come off. Rook a6, knowing that d1's controlled. No back row issue. Putting some pressure on here. Rook c8. Now back row threat. That's parried with h4. Rook c7, because a4 was coming for rook takes a7 there. Bishop g4, rook a5, and now this pawn is in trouble. Knight d6, 2 pawns. You might think, hold on a sec, did it have to go to 2 pawns down? Let me go through that slowly again. Hold on a sec. On bishop g4, what were the choices? It's actually attacked by 2. Has to go forward, right? Because we're just going to take it anyway. So by going forward, it went onto a skewer line of knight and pawn, just being skewered here by the rook. So knight d6, 2 pawns down. Check. Rook f3 holding a3. Rook e3 pinning the knight, unpinning. Bishop e2 holding key squares against the knight. So holding that knight. Kicking the knight back. Check. Bishop f3, check, check, rook c3, going to pin the knight again, maybe. Stopping the pin, king g4, the king looks to be making its way up the board. Is there a trap here? King f5 is actually possible, it seems. Rook c6. Is there a trap here with king f5? Let me just see. Rook a6 was played. Oh, yeah, the pawn dropped. No, he holds the pawn first before doing anything. This can wait. This little trap. He's 2 pawns up. Check. And now g4 is going to be pushing again. The knight is dominated by the bishop. So by dominating the knight and then pushing it back, that's unpleasant. This check is nothing much to worry about. It's g5. It is played. King goes to g6. So it's 2 pawns. Rook a5. There was a little I think there was a little trap here. Bishop c6. Even that's okay. Even this is fine. Even this position, this is actually better for white anyway. The knight's no match, it seems, for the 4 pawns, but that was sidestepped with rook a5. We have knight d4, bishop g4 hitting the rook. And actually, I think Magnus either resigned or lost on time here. So if he plays the check, king takes, and if he goes here, it looks passive, and actually rook d5 check wins the knight. So either way, a 3rd pawn is dropping off, or a knight. Wow. Now, what shocks me is actually, personally, of interest to me, is how to play against the Slav. The Slav is like one of the most annoying openings, and throughout this tournament, people are either playing the Slav or the Caro-Kann, these super solid openings. But he seemed to get a very nice position from word go in this game. I mean, some conclusions. Nice position from word go. B5 was perhaps too adventurous. A5 tactically apparently was much better from an engine point of view. White just seemed to have a lot of pressure. Nice bishop retreat, nice tactic. A forced fork opportunity. Both knights heading for a forking, which won a pawn, then he won another pawn, and then this king infiltration. For a rapid game, it just seems like, dare I say it, kind of, it was good from the word go. I don't know what you guys thought of that. It was pretty convincing. Not too much counterplay. Which is a nice way of saying a one-sided game, I guess, when you say not too much counterplay. I mean, I don't think there was too much counterplay. I mean, it was simplified as well, which reduces counterplay. So, okay, let's have a look at another game of Vassily Ivanchuk in his tournament. So he's like the day 2 leader. So here's another massive player in the tournament he was playing with the white pieces. And I tell you, statistically, he played at least 3 Slav defenses. So if you really play d4, and you know you want something against the Slav, well, especially for your, well, this looks interesting, because we're going to see another example of this line for a solid repertoire. If you might be building a solid repertoire and you want something against the Slav, let's have a look at another example. So this is against Mamedyarov in round 10. So Ivanchuk with white again, d4, d5, c4, c6. So again we get this repeat of knight f3. In live book, yeah, knight f3 is the top move to start off with, and then we get this move further down. You know, as I mentioned, knight c3 or e3. Queen c3 is like the 3rd choice move, but yeah, it just seems to be a logical, it's kind of safe move. And if you are building up a repertoire, let's have a quick look at bishop g4, by the way. If black was desperate, you know, knight e5, if black was desperate, you know, he could run into trouble, I think. This might be a way of getting a small advantage, even g4. Let me just take it off and you have a small advantage. Finish out the bishop, maybe. Okay, so if you're building a repertoire, just in case you're building a repertoire from this position. But anyway, in this game we see, not building the triangle, d takes c4. This is another major choice. So e6 was tried by Magnus. We see d takes c4 here in this position. So this tests the queen recapture line, which does make way. It's given up the f5 square. That's used immediately. So the bishop is going to be outside the pawn chain. So a very different position now from what we've just seen. How does white proceed? g3, bishop g2, white castles, e3. This, to me, I can't explain it. To me, I find it intriguing. This move e3. I'm not sure what you guys think. I do find it slightly intriguing. In one respect, you might argue it's kind of blocking in the bishop and weakening some light squares, but another safeguarding the d4 square, the d4 pawn. Okay, so after castles, but it does mean by playing e3 the queen can actually come back to a safe place on e2. So that is, it's when you see it like this, it's an obvious explanation of e3 for the queen to be here on e2, because you don't want the queen to be a major tactical liability for tempo gains. So keeping the queen safe away from tempo gains, that's good, you might think. So rook c8, rook d1, the black queen comes out, available for tempo gains. One tempo gain, bishop d2. In fact, queen b5 is offered. Black volunteers double pawns here for a bit of piece play. If it just went back, I think, to be annoying if he went there. If knight c3, I think it's too dangerous for black to go pawn hunting. e4, and then we've got access to rook b1. It's too dangerous. And then we could just win our pawn back with advantage, I think, to white. So actually the idea was queen b5. Slightly intriguing maybe, accepting the double pawns here. Now knight e1 just hits b7. You might ask, hang on, what about rook c2? In the game, knight e4 is played, blocking that diagonal. If rook c2, sorry, we've got knight c2. Bother me. Yeah, c2's covered. If we move this pawn, this is okay. Knight c3. This is okay. Actually, I think we've got a c6 issue. If it's something like a5, I think the knight can even play knight a7 to c6. Maybe. Okay, so knight e4 was played. Knight c3. Black plays tactically now, actually. Starts to play tactically. Mamedyarov. Knight takes, and then bishop b4. Sacking this pawn, but he's got a specific idea in mind of playing rook takes c3, which is leading to great simplification here. So we have this simplified position where black has the 2-to-1 pawn majority. He hasn't got a double pawn or anything. So has white got anything to play with here? Black's also first to that c file. Knight d3. King f8, knight b4, now rook b2, g4, h4, threatening to trap the bishop, I believe. Actually, that's not so clear actually, because there's knight g5. It looks threatening. Anyway, it's check, knight c3, h5 is played here, bishop b1, a3. Actually, black technically is doing okay here, although his pieces seem, you might think the pieces might have an issue at some point. f5, but black is okay here. Well, in fact, there's a suggestion a5, a4, and black might be okay. This, for example, here, this should be okay for black apparently. Anyway, f5 was played. Maybe this is a slightly loose thing. And also you'll notice actually with f5, if this pawn's taken away, we've got a passed pawn. This is actually what happens. Here, it doesn't look desirable to play bishop takes. That might technically be a good move, but this was played giving white this passed pawn, which is pushed. King e8. So this is a trump card for white, this passed pawn. Or is it a liability? Knight c6. So defending that pawn, the king is ready to march up the board, this time on dark squares. Bishop e4 compared to the previous game we saw. That's taken. Now we see actually knight b8. So if this drops, then this is weak, so that's moved. But now d6, rook d1, rook b3. It gets a bit intricate here. Now this is showing black's in a little bit of bother in this position, playing rook c1. This is already getting a little bit precarious because white's king is more active than black's. This is starting to get a bit dodgy looking, with white's king actually being a very attacking piece in this position now compared to black's. Black's trump card is the 2-to-1 pawn majority, you might think, and he tries to use that. a4, and now b4, breaking through a passed pawn with tempo, which seems scary because it seems as though, hold on, it's only 2 squares away from queening. But key move here, rook d2, key idea, check, and then knight c6, check. It's all running with check to lift the blockade. So no time for a2. Example, or knight b5 was played, if a2, just to show that, check, and then we just lift the blockade, right? It's all with check. It's all with check, check, check. So rook d2, white is in the driving seat. In fact, knight b5, check is a good move, but it wasn't played. King e5, holding the pawn with the king. So any attempt to distract, I think here, this wasn't played. We can just simply consider taking that, or even d7 first, might be better, and then take it, because the knight will be holding it on d7. Either are strong moves here, actually. So a2 is out of the question. We see king d8, knight a6. Actually, it might have been black's last chance, this position after knight a6. This might not have been the strongest move in the position, because apparently rook h1 is close to equalizing. Example, d7, check, is better for black. Because I think there might be... oh, rook d5. And black's winning. Yeah, an engine would think of this stuff. Rook h1 is close to equalizing, technically. Instead of d7, say here, and trying to get the rook in. I mean, like, trying to lift the blockade, we have a check. Yeah. And I think the point is we can sack to save black, and that's actually winning for black here, a2. If here, then, well, we take the rook. There's no stopping black's pawn. So yeah, the move which black seems to have to rely on would be, it seems, rook h1 here to equalize. In which case, just checking this for those theoretically minded how to win this, because this doesn't look like a majorly complex position, but it seems as though technically king e6 is much better. Well, rook h1, we just go with the checks, check and then check. And what else? Well, it doesn't allow that rook h1 basically. Rook c3, try this, rook d3. If d7 here is not as clear apparently as rook d1, with the idea of rook g1, a2 or like this. Oh, there's even a take here possibility. I think this is one of the points tactically that we've always got this idea that the king, they don't need the rook. The rook can sacrifice itself for that pawn in this line. So this is winning. So this is a more clear line, it seems, from a theoretical point of view. But knight a6 was played. Black, funny enough, didn't find rook h1. Played actually rook b1. White is well back in the driving seat with a winning position here. Either king e6 or d7, both winning. D7 was played. Rook b2. Either rook d1 or rook d5 is sufficient here, because white wants to play like this or this to kick out the blockader. Rook takes f2, and actually I'm not sure if black resigned. He might resign with his move, but here it's a forced win with knight c5. So either knight b7 or knight e6 is going to be lifting the blockade. Yeah. As an example, here, check. Actually, we should just probably best is to take that for d8. Okay, so yeah, the d pawn was winning in the end. This was the last move, it seems. So knight c5 wasn't even on board. This was the last move with a resign, it seems. Rook takes f2. So Mamedyarov, playing the Slav, also lost. Okay, so let's go on to another game. Oh, so draw some conclusions from this one. Let me just check earlier on. Try and draw some conclusions. So black took on c4 early, took the f5 square with the bishop. Did a strange queen b5 accepting double pawns. White didn't seem to have much until later f5 created a pass pawn for white, and that was actually turned out to be a winning trump card. Black had to find very, very careful, precise moves to stay in the game with that very dangerous d pawn. So rook h1 was a missed chance, it seems, but white's d pawn seems to triumph against black's 2-1 pawn majority. I think in this game also it featured heavily a king walk. Aggressive king as well helped Ivanchuk win in the simplified position. Okay, so let's have a look now. Okay, let's have a look at another one of his wins with the black pieces. Let's go to the black pieces. So this was in round one. This is how he kicked off his tournament in round one. Federico Pere Ponza. Last FIDE rating 2589. He was a GM back in 2011. Strong player. Perez is one of Argentina's top players in a nutshell. So let's flip the board. E4 from Federico. We have the Sicilian defense being played by Vassily Ivanchuk. Now this is fairly. This is Sicilian Richter Rauser. Queen d2. Oh, apparently he resigned. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that on the previous game. Queen d2. Very theoretical position, it seems. a6. h6 is chosen here. This is loads of games here. Very theoretical. Very theoretical. Still theoretical. a3 or bishop e2 is usually played here. a3 is played in this one. And here, now, usually bishop e2 is played in this position. There's been at least 32 games high level bishop e2. E takes 6 games, h4 3 games, f3 1 game. We have the 1 game choice, f3 here. Black castled, e5. You might think this is a bit strange, but instead of knight d7, knight h5 was played. You might find that a bit strange. Ivanchuk's ready with a defensive idea against the bishop sack. He's like, I don't know if you can call this provoking a bishop sack. If he had gone to d7, maybe h4 is dangerous, trying to slide the rook in. White does have a nice advanced pawn here, and possibly this is at least a way of forcing a draw, maybe sometimes. But anyway, we get a very different game with knight h5. Okay, so what's the note here? Bishop takes was actually played. If the bishop drops back, bishop b6 might be annoying. Knight takes g3. And if h takes, this is apparently black's doing very well here, very well. And if queen takes, I think we've got things like, we don't even need to use queen g5, but black is doing well. I think that's okay, but black can just, I think, go for a b-file attack. Actually, this looks like a nice road to use. So anyway, so yeah, given this b-file is lurking here, this road to white's king, white goes for it. Bishop takes h6. G takes, queen takes, knight g7, and it looks very scary, right? Bishop d3, threatening a mate in one. Now this is covered with f5, which is a fairly standard move you'd want to play defensively to cut out this diagonal, and it's not even taken en passant. I think that's harmless if white takes en passant, because then it energizes the black pieces. This is just one check and that's it. And in fact the knight holds h5 as well. There's nothing else here. Black's doing fantastic there. So that pawn is left on f5 and it's just chipped away to try and tear open the g-file. We have bishop takes c3, and there's a very interesting defense idea in this position which is used, which apparently should have been better for white anyway, but just for those testing the defense resources, can you find defensive resource here for 200 points? I'm not saying it's actually that good, I'm just saying what was played actually. So yes, black's a piece up, but actually I think technically he's in trouble a bit. So black to play. Any ideas? Black's playing defend. Any ideas? Oh, I'll show you. Just rook a7 actually. Defending in advance this g-file onslaught. Rook hg1. Maybe, apparently, it might have been better. No, let's go with this. Okay, so queen a5. G takes f5. This is quite dangerous looking. Now here actually e takes f5 was played, and actually white is concerned about this c3 pawn, funny enough, and plays king d2. It might be the case, it seems, that rook g3 could be very, very dangerous for black, like very dangerous. Let's just see as an example. Queen takes c3. f4. And yeah, let's just follow this for a moment here. Yeah, it looks as though white's got a crushing attack in these lines. White, so just actually the act of doubling the rooks with the inclusion of f4 for some reason, because if he doubled the rooks here, then queen takes e5 would be defending g7. So the point of f4 as a precursor to doubling the rooks So make sure the queen isn't defending. So he had that same goal in mind, I guess, when he played king d2 to stop the queen bouncing off. But apparently, yeah, rook g3 and this idea, allowing queen takes, is better for white. It looks as though this is actually quite crushing. I gave you the example of rook b7. If rook e8, double the rooks, and how does black defend? How? If here, I think I'm missing something about this position myself now after looking. Why king d1 would be good. Let's have a quick look. King goes here, then what's the point? Oh, rook h3, and then there's no defense apparently. Yeah. Just okay, and now I'm interested why rook h3, there'll be check and then taking the rook. So it seems the attacking move in this position would be yeah, this and then e6. Okay, and then on rook e8 rather, this and then king d1. I guess it makes sense. White is wanting to play rook h3 without losing the rook. So putting the king here allows rook h3 without losing the rook at one level. Of simplifying this, why this is winning for white. Yeah. But, okay, in the game this didn't happen. So king d2, we have a very different scenario now, indeed, after rook d8. It looks as though, although this is technically attacking, but rook g5 is played, d4. And again, black is threatening to bounce the queen to defend g7. Again, it seems as though f4 here would be a key move for white, with a potentially crushing attack after. But it wasn't played. In fact, check was played. And we have rook d5. And now the attack goes astray. It seems the attack really goes astray totally in this position. I mean, completely goes astray. Can we go back to it, the attack now? I think it's far too late with the king on d2. This is actually winning for black. This wasn't. This is just winning for black apparently. So it's been ruined. It seems so far. It's in the process of being ruined. Any attacking prospect. Queen takes c6 is ruin for white now. That ruins everything for white. Apparently doubling the rooks even here is dangerous. Check. Only one move to carry on here. Check. And this is still okay for white, even if that's dropped. Do these checks run out? King c2. I think they might run out at this position, and it's still very good for white here. It's winning for white there. But yeah, no, he completely ruined his attack, it seems, by playing queen takes c6, because now there's a counter attack. There's counterplay. Queen takes c3 check. The avoidance of counterplay is, by the way, something not just intuitively a lot of players think about. If you think about it, there's actually a counterplay symbol on the old Infomata games. Where you put an annotator could put the counterplay symbol, meaning that counterplay is being generated. It's that important. You don't want your opponent having counterplay, Black's got counterplay, basically. I think this is a good example of black now having huge counterplay. Check. Queen takes f3 check. Queen e3 check. And you might think a normal person would just take the rook here, be done with that, maybe. But he wants to win that rook with check. He plays check here. Now, if the king goes back to the e file, I think it's about e5 dropping. Yeah, it's all just collapsed. The whole thing has collapsed. White's attacking pieces are being gobbled with check. This is now a total nightmare scenario. Unfortunately for White, it's a total nightmare scenario. He's losing his attacking pieces all with check at the moment. A good move here, bishop b7. The attack's gone. It's gone. It's all but a distant dream. All of those variations, distant dream. Bishop takes. Black's piece up for nothing. Queen f4. Threatening queen e4 among other things, just to get the queens off. Queen e4 check. One last glimmer of hope is extinguished with rook c6 en route to taking c2, just to stop queen g6. So if the queen moves now, I think we just take on c2 or even rook g6, just easy. Yeah, it's just, yeah. You see, you shouldn't allow counterplay. It seems, in one respect, it seems as though the engine is showing a plan, kind of in a delayed manner, to double rooks, but with no issues of e5 being used or a rook dropping off. So, but the basic plan seems to be just to double rooks in a very safe manner, without any counterplay. But black got loads of counterplay and ruined the attack and won all the pieces with check. So that was nasty. Okay, but yeah, so Ivanchuk survived that, even with that weird knight at h5. So some lessons from this game. If I just go back and try not lessons, some conclusions. The surprising knight h5 seemed to work very well. The piece sack was provoked. White should have, in theory, if he was a computer, would have had a good time there, even after the piece sack was actually potentially theoretically effective. But the move king d2 started to make things tricky, a little bit tricky for White, and black managed to get counterplay basically and started winning pieces with check. Yeah, I've told you something top secret about informata symbols, which maybe you didn't know, but keep it top secret, okay? There's actually an official informata symbol about counterplay. So if you don't have that as a concept in your games, it might be time to think about it. Just in a general view, does the opponent have any potential for counterplay? If you can just do your plans without counterplay, that's a good thing, basically, as this game might show as an example. So I'll show you another game, Ivanchuk against Mamedyarov. It's shown with arrows, I think. The counterplay symbol. So Ivanchuk was white here. This is in round 2. e4, e5. We have royal pairs, and actually he goes for the delayed exchange royal pairs. Bishop takes c6, the third exchange variation. And here, as well as being able to put pressure on the e-pawn, well, that's one of the main ideas for white now, is to put a bit of pressure on the e-pawn, and later play for f4 from this position, because there's still, it's slightly vulnerable. We see knight h4. Yeah, there's a plan of f4 now coming up soon here, f4. So this looks like a nice position to get. E takes, bishop takes, and white's knights are okay on the light squares, but in fact I think this game was troublesome. We're about to see why it's so troublesome, because actually black's pretty solid here with the bishop pair. Black is actually pretty solid. We have a game which black's got the double pawns, but is very, very solid. Bishops go off there. Why, you might think? Why bishop e1? Because black may have been playing to get this sort of lockdown position on dark squares, so that was challenged there. And then this was taken, and we get a whole series of manoeuvring, endless manoeuvring from this position. Queen f2. Okay, we get a load of manoeuvring now, because it looks as though the f file is going to be interesting at some point. A lot of shuffling. The f file still seems interesting vaguely, but it's solidly protected at f6 at the moment. Queen d4 offering exchange of queens, that's avoided. And now here at move 50, h4, rook goes to e5. Now things get interesting actually. Things get a little bit more lively. There's a pawn break used, g4, which you've got to be careful with around the king. But this is actually okay for white in this position to play g4. It gives a more convenient target now. g6 is a more convenient target for queen g3. And black panics somewhat, it seems. Oh well, I don't know if panic's the right word. Don't know if panic's the right word, but queen g3 is threatened. How to parry queen g3? It's dangerous. Example: if the rook moved back, queen g3, I think is end of game, because this whole g file is bad news. It's too late here. It's too late. We got rook takes f5 in that position. It's crashing through. So actually, no, this isn't panic. It's probably one of the best moves. f5. Now we have a position. It seems scary to play to win the pawn here. It might actually be playable just about, especially if your computer, you wouldn't be too terrified. But it wasn't. This wasn't played. If takes, as an example, check. Scary with this trebling. Scary. Apparently this is okay because it's on white's king here. So even if we lose this, even if we lose that, this gets to be it should be fine. It should be equal here apparently. But this wasn't taken. This wasn't taken. We have actually rook e7 and back to the trebling, and it's here that actually it was taken. Check. And best is to actually take this, believe it or not, and king h8. And this position, even though it looks terrifying, this move again, not queen d5 here, but queen e7. And this, apparently, it looks terrifying a bit, but it's okay, apparently, for black. But in the game, actually, in the game, we get the move king g8, which is very, very different, exceptionally different. In fact, test your tactics. There's something very, very good here. Dare I say, a forced checkmate in 4. So find the mate in 4 in advance for 200 points. There's a forced checkmate in 4 from this position. Can you find it? I'll give you time to analyse the position. It's forcing moves. Yeah. Yeah, it's all forcing moves. All forcing moves. There's a mate in 4. Found it? And it starts off with rook f8 check. Doesn't matter where the king goes. The key move here. Queen f7 check. It's this pawn is actually part of the mating net in this line. So if here rook h8 is checkmate, and the same thing if basically if takes. Pardon me. If takes check, and that pawn is a mating net with the rook. Rook's like this, covering all the escapes. Checkmate. But the game was resigned actually after Queen f7. Okay, so interesting game, that one. Nice finish, at least. Some conclusions. Looking back at this game, you know, the thirds exchange royal pairs. Got a structural advantage. Black had the bishop pair. A series of manoeuvring until the key break with g4 created another target on g6, and maybe black's accuracy needed to go up, but instead there was a blunder in a position which was getting very dangerous and scary, so he allowed this mate in 4 basically. Okay, another game here. Or actually, I don't know, we could leave some other games, leave the tension of some other games for next week, actually, not to make this overrun too much. Shall we carry on next week? I wonder. We can take a vote. Okay, yeah, we'll keep it to about an hour each time, I think. Maybe. Alright. Okay, we'll have a look at some other interesting games from this World Rapid tournament next week. Okay, so thanks for coming. And maybe Ivanchuk will eventually win the tournament. Depends what happens tomorrow. But he's in leading position at the moment. A point clear. So this is the point at the moment. He's in leading position. So maybe he has a shot. He's already beaten 2 of the big guns in the tournament. Carlsen, Mamedyarov. He's beaten 2 of them. So it's a great opportunity for Vassily Ivanchuk to take this tournament at this point, it seems, if he can hold it together tomorrow. Okay, so we'll find out maybe next week. We'll look over some games, what happened. Okay, so see you next week. Comments, questions, likes, appreciate it. Thanks very much.